So we were talking about how the sensory learning program really stimulates the inputs to the brain, being the cranial nerves where information comes in and where information comes out as well. But that's the main input. And we were talking about how sensory learning integration through this program is helpful for just about every other therapy because it helps us to integrate what we're getting in and what we're putting out. And we were talking, I was making the joke that SLP, I know SLP sensory learning program. I know of SLP is speech language pathology, and that's kind of confusing. And you told me how speech language pathologists often come to you.
We we have a number of speech language pathologists that are either using the program in their practice or refer some of their clients here. And part of it's because they see it as a successful foundation for what they're doing. Much the same way some of the developmental optometrists will refer people here before a course of VT. Basically, what we're doing is working with the sensory inputs, and these are the same channels that drive a lot of the organization that then makes the motor outputs efficient. And there are a lot of models that support this. There's Jean Eyre's model, and she has the ultimate goal, of course, being awareness, cognition, healthy regulation of emotion, self-esteem.
I like all those things.
All of those are good things. And she has that really as being the capstone of the pyramid and working back to this foundation. And the foundation starts with sensory input. The whole development, the original development, is driven by sensory.
Right.
And she sees these as, threads that are integrating. And it starts out with motor, vestibular as being the primary sense. That understanding, that visceral understanding of where we are in space, and coordinating quickly after that with our sense of touch, and then proprioceptive input from the muscles and joints. It tells us how much force we need to use when we're picking up a glass or something.
I lost that. Thinking back, when I would pick up a glass of water and just spill it, because I'd just grab it, wouldn't really
Right.
have that proprioception coming back to tell me this cup weighs exactly this amount and you need to adjust your muscles accordingly. I mean, obviously, this is unconscious
Right.
information
It's
that's being sent.
all supposed to happen at the speed of light.
Right, it's all automatic. It's supposed to be.
Well, it does, but everything develops initially with input. And so we receive that input, we organize it, and then we organize the motor response. We make that connection. There's that basic physics principle that what fires together wires together. And that's part of the advantage of working with the sensory all together, is that we're not just making each stronger individually, but we're helping that integration. And the integration is part of what gets us to that ultimate goal, not these separate channels, sort of that silo method. Everything's developing individually. But they really started to understand that these things develop with an integrated sense, and that integration drives our understanding. Damasio, who's one of the contemporary philosophers, has something called convergence zones, that when we have multiple sensory streams that come together in an idea, it gives like a third dimension. The concept becomes richer, and so our ability to work with something conceptually becomes richer, and in a sense is driven by these sensory modalities that we have, not independently again, but coming together to give us almost different perspectives of the same object, the same scene. So, and Jean Eyre sees this as coming specific stages: the motor, the body awareness, integrating with the visual and what we see, integrating then with what we hear, and then the motor responses really being driven by that. So when we come to having something that's well organized, performing well with endurance and adaptability, we're really looking at this complex conversation with our sensory environment that's happening fluidly and accurately and through several different senses at once. And that's why a lot of the different types of therapists, people that work with trauma, people that work with injury, people that work with kids, when there's something that should be automatic that isn't, they'll come back to us, because that's kind of the beginning, the sensory channel.
Wow, that's really cool to put that in my understanding and simplified version. I think of essentially when we're bringing in this multiple channels of sensory input, um, we're kind of opening the communication lines to that, not only into the brain but also coming out. So both directions, we are getting better communication happening between um, the central nervous system and the peripheral nervous system, and how they talk to each other. And in doing so, especially, we're talking about other therapies such as speech language pathology, such as occupational therapy, um, and physical therapy. And actually, while I was recovering, I would actually, even up to like a couple months ago, I still do it sometimes. I wear a compression glove on my left hand because my left side doesn't communicate very well. And by adding sensory stimulation to my left hand, so that it was sending signals to my brain that said, hey, your hand's being squeezed, right? It opened up the communication better for my brain to tell my hand what to do. And thinking about that with these sessions of sensory integration coming in, and kind of almost forcing the brain to fill in the blanks and really build something, with the information it's getting, so that you're not only bringing it in but you're then interpreting it at the same time. That's I imagine that's opening up the channels to make these other therapies more effective.
That's it. It's the sensory that really drives so much of that neuroplasticity, because we want the capacity to meet the demands of the environment. So in this case, we're kind of shaping those demands rather intentionally to open specific channels, to present an emphasis here on processing the sound or processing the light or integrating the light and the motion. Um, but but that's really what we're looking at, and it's not something so much that we're forcing on the brain, but as we create this enriched environment, it sort of takes as much as it can until you close your eyes, or there's another way where we just sort of naturally begin to mitigate it, and then we come back again in a short period of time to present that challenge and go just a little bit farther. So it's almost like we're engaging the system in an active training. It's still in the driver's seat making a lot of the decisions, but we're giving it this enriched state so that it can have every opportunity to develop some specific areas. But you're right, that connection goes from the subconscious, unconscious perception all the way through the integration, and beginning to work with it, unravel some of the puzzles in a conscious way. And that's a sort of following the complete path, which is an advantage.